Like the more generalized a solution set is, oftentimes like you just get like absurdly complexity. And then at some point the complexity management becomes your problem. So you aim towards simplification, but as you're trying to simplify.
Like a builder building an infrastructure company, you need to have lived in that pain long enough to know what are the right primitives and what are the right abstractions. And then
speaking of workflows, right? We have this whole like workflow no code builder. We spent years and years building it and improving it. And now
what do we need to build to be the best like instant payments platform for the future?
Because consistency is hard to enforce at this point. Like if you're gonna build really, really fast, you probably will lose some degree of consistency. But at the end of the day, you know, including our product, like there's an expectation of the data you wanna see first out of it every single time you go in.
Hey y'all, welcome to Personas podcast, and this is where we talk a little bit about the humanity behind the tools, the platforms that we're building. So I'm here with like two amazing people. I'm actually scared because they're like legit. So we have Matt here from Modern Treasury and Rick, technically my boss, and also Persona's founder. So before we even start on me trying to explain what Persona is or what Modern Treasury is, I'd love to hear from you both. So maybe Matt, if you want to start by who is Matt? So you're like, there's maybe a time where you were born and now we built Modern Treasury, so there's something in between. So maybe talk a little bit about who you are, what happened in there, and then move to Rick.
Yeah, my name is Matt. I'm co-founder and CEO of Modern Treasury. I was born in Florida, so I lived there before. It was the second or third or fourth or fifth tech capital of the world. But I grew up learning how to code a little bit as a kid, but actually doing other stuff, high school debate team and things like that. And then got to college and decided I didn't want to sit inside doing debate all day. So I learned how to code, which I guess was still inside, but joined the rowing team. But I became an engineer, moved to Silicon Valley, and then started on the journey that led to Modern Treasury. So happy to be here.
I'm Rick. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Persona. I didn't know you grew up in the South. I grew up in Texas, so I'm from Texas originally. It's unremarkable. There's nothing really to share on the background of it all.
It's very hot.
It's very hot. Yeah, it's hot over there. Yeah. I also didn't do computer science originally, but I studied math, and then there's not a lot of like degrees out there for math, or it's like either you do academia or something else. So try to figure out something. It was actually my old professor who got me into tech, and then I came out here. I was over at Square for about 5 years. So we were building a lot of things over on the accounting side of things that I think payment side of things, and which became really, really clear. So I remember actually when I first saw Modern Treasury, I was like, oh my God, like shouldn't have rebuilt all of this in-house. So it was really cool. But on those ends, beyond that, most of my background's been engineer, and been at it at Persona now for about 8 years.
Nice, welcome. Oh, that's great. Question for you both, but I'll start with you, Matt, because both of you, coming from the engineering background, maybe there's something around reverse engineering things. I think for both of you have thought about like maybe a common problem that exists out there, but I would say even like, if you're doing like ledgering or, wire transfers, they seem more like just plumbing issues for a lot of companies, but you probably decided to build this eventually and maybe modernize this. Can you explain a little bit like what was the trigger for you, what led you to start Modern Treasury?
Yeah. Well, in general, I think a good recipe for starting companies is to be an engineer at a company and work on a team and deal with something really annoying and frustrating, ideally that has a lot of integrations or flat files or whatever, and then say like, why am I doing this? In our case, that was what we were living. So my co-founders and I worked at this mortgage lender called Lending Home, and we had to build systems for money movement, and we had to work directly with banks and build a ledger. And after a few years of doing that, we just raised our heads up and said, why are we doing this? And we being in San Francisco, just walked down the street to other companies and asked, what are you guys doing? And we went to Square, and I think Square had 5 ledger implementations. Like every engineering team would implement it in their own way. And we went to all the suspects like Uber and AngelList and Gusto and whoever would talk to us basically, and everybody was building the same systems. And so it's like you as an engineer, you kind of see these like hard technical problems that you're dealing with, and we use APIs for a lot of things that abstract complexity. And so you say like, why can't I just use an API for this whole like iceberg? Because inside of the company, you essentially have that. You have an API, like an engineering team builds a thing, a feature, a set of services, and exposes that as an API to other engineering teams. And so that you can build a company around that by just taking that like service and saying, that's my product now. And so we in particular were passionate about this problem around money movement, and we decided to start our company there.
Amazing. And Rick, similarly, I would guess for a lot of companies, they think, okay, compliance, I have to think about KYC as like the very first thing or like some sort of like identity verification. But you went beyond. You're like, okay, what is the identity infrastructure for the internet? And you probably had like some ideas initially, and probably similarly to Matt, you had challenges that you had to face, and it became clear that, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here to build. But what was the, the trigger there? What made you start, and, how do you foresee this? Like, is this infrastructure for identity now?
No, I mean, I think the story behind it is actually remarkably similar, right? Engineer at a company, building a lot of the similar infrastructure, same kind of core challenges. Wasn't quite as industrious and go to a bunch of other places, a little too shy. So, but the good news for Square at that time was that we already were dealing with so many different identity challenges across different teams. So effectively, there was like an internal kind of already need around consolidation. So from Cash App to Caviar to payroll to capital to merchant onboarding and all of those had a lot of different identity needs, security, otherwise. So that kind of became the genesis of like, well, look, we're dealing with this problem. Every company probably to some degree is. Is there a way in which to kind of consolidate all of these efforts? And for us, a lot of it is like the simplification and the kind of consolidation play because identity is so complicated. There's so much PII now, the sensitivity of the information, the management of it all. And that became a lot of kind of the genesis of the idea behind the company. I mean, but really, I always have to pay credit to my co-founder. Charles is actually the one who's the much more entrepreneurial of the two of us. I worked on the problem, but he's the one who like had a lot of like the vision for what a startup could be, what it could actually kind of manifest as.
Interesting. Wow. So I guess it might be slightly different today with like with the AI world we're in. But if you think about like dealing with this problem that you're both dealing with, the data and the access to this is pretty messy. It's not like a clear one way to do it. But you both decide to own it and be like, hey, let's figure it out. Let's solve this. What's been like most challenging from like the beginning to think about, okay, how do we solve this? Because one is just the idea of there's a possible solution for then actually executing it and making it happen and making it work for other companies that care about this. And then if you extrapolate thinking enterprises that truly care about it and have like a lot of guardrails in place, what has been like a challenge from like that begin to where you are today?
I can take this first. I mean, I think building infrastructure is pretty challenging. You need to especially I think both of us are fairly horizontal platforms. We work with a lot of types of companies that do everything from like payroll and real estate to healthcare and education. And so money movement itself is fairly business agnostic. You're moving money through pipes. And so when you build the infrastructure, you need to do it in a way that if you want to truly be horizontal, can be horizontal. And that requires knowing what the right primitives are, the right abstractions, like building a good system that can be plugged into different types of platforms without being very opinionated. And so that's a really tough trade-off to make, honestly. That's why you see a lot of API platforms, for example, that go through many versions of their APIs, or people just say their APIs are terrible and they use them in spite of it, or they choose not to use it. And so as like a builder building an infrastructure company, you need to have lived in that pain long enough to know what are the right primitives and what are the right abstractions, and then put out a product for that. So I think that was something we came in with. I imagine it's pretty similar in the world of identity.
Yeah, I mean, one thing on that, like, and I'm sure you see this a lot, one complication we always face is the idea of like generalization, making sure you can support every single use case out there versus simplification. Like the more generalized a solution set is, oftentimes like you just get like absurdly complexity. And then at some point, like complexity management becomes your problem. So you aim towards simplification, but as you're trying to simplify, doesn't work for a bunch of people. And like finding out that constant kind of balance between the two is a thing, especially for infrastructural companies, right? And I mean, for us going into it, identity historically was a very fragmented space. You had vendors who specialize on every single kind of core vertical. The one thing that of the theory of why can you tie it together is that identity has become something in which, like for a lot of different use cases, you need like that same core kind of framework around, right? And I think that's almost certainly similar for you, where you see like for payments that like having disparate. I mean, at Square we did actually have like multiple ledgers. I mean, on Capital we had our own ledger on top of Square's ledger. Right? Like that's sort of like multi kind of faceted problem. So this idea of like there is a gravity towards consolidation, but that gravity I think is tricky because you're also balancing against, well, like the reason why we built our own ledger on Capital at that time was specifically because we felt the underlying one couldn't support us. So we needed to like, get more and more customization. So whenever building an infrastructure company, this constant tension between simplification and generalization is a really, really challenging one.
And I guess adding to that point you mentioned, talking about the platform side of things, but there's the compliance side of things on top of that you can multiply by the more horizontal, the more generalist, the more you have to deal with different types of compliance regulations by, either being like government issued, but could be the industry that you're in. How do you navigate that? Because that's not an engineering problem, but you have to figure this out as well, right?
Well, we're in the business of moving money. So we have a payments product that helps businesses move money. Sometimes they're moving their own money. A lot of the platforms that run on us are moving money on behalf of their users, whether their users are businesses or other individuals. And so you have multifaceted compliance problems, and you do need to do those. There's your compliance program, your policies. There are other elements that are adjacent, like fraud. And so all those come into what you're building. And so I think people's a big element of doing that. So part of it is like, who do you bring into the company that has seen these problems before, that can help build the right product and program and things like that. Part of it with compliance specifically is actually prioritizing it and making sure that it matters. And one thing I say to the company a lot is that it's not something we're doing because we have to do it. It's something that actually makes a big difference to our customers and is part of what makes our product better. Like part of the reason we've won a lot of business, for example, we recently rolled out a stablecoin payments product. And one of the big frustrations we heard from folks was that other platforms had, very long KYC lead times for their users. And it was a paid process. It would take 2 months to get a business approved. And so we see that as a place where we can not only, uphold our obligations to, onboard a business, but actually stand out and do that better, not be opaque, do that faster, do that in an actually automated way behind the scenes. This is where we use Persona also. And so there's the plug.
Yeah. Hey, what up? Thanks for the plug, man.
But yeah, exactly. So no, I think it's just like something you have to kind of embrace as like the DNA. If compliance is a part of your product offering, like it has to be something you're very good at.
Especially on the compliance piece, I do think, especially with one thing I'm sure y'all are thinking a lot about these days is with like software coming down to, the cost of like building software is like quickly approaching zero. The ability right now in which if you want to submit we've been like testing this here and there where you just take some sort of a open source project and see like just using the API layer, whether it's replicatable by AI. It's terrifying. Like year over year, we did this experiment 1 year ago versus a couple months back, and how far AI's gone is like crazy. So I think like being in like the compliance space, being in a space where there's a lot of operation, regulatory challenges, and just like knowledge expertise, like being a knowledge expertise driven kind of a business these days, I think creates a lot of kind of a defense against, well, hard to say, who knows, right? Maybe AGI is here, but but it does create like a lot of kind of a differentiation from just like pure software against, especially as AI becomes more and more present within like kind of the world today.
Well, you probably think about like the moats need to go deeper. So it's not just about building like a WYSIWYG workflow tool, but it's also like the identity graph under the hood. Or
hey, that was a big conversation actually for us internally, because there's like things we've been, speaking of workflows, right? We have this whole like workflow no code builder. We've spent years and years building it, improving it. And now, we really have to ask ourselves, is this the wrong abstraction? Is this do we have to rethink this from the ground up? I think there are a lot of parts of our platform right now where we've been thinking a lot about, is this even like the best way to go about it? Honestly, like using a WYSIWYG versus just telling AI, I want this. Yeah. I kind of want the latter right now.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'd rather write out a markdown file for the agent and just say, do this, then that. Here's your tree. Like, go. Yeah. It's a lot easier.
So I guess you started this, so I have to throw the A word again, the AI word. So there may be like, I'll bring 3 layers, but there may be more that you're thinking about when we think AI. One is employee usage. So, within the team, how are you empowering and, allowing, or say like working with the teams internally to allow them to use, and what are maybe some interesting use cases you have been seeing so far. Then this second layer is more like the platform itself, right? So can AI help us expedite certain, releases, or, get certain features done faster, or even like workflows, right? So maybe all agentics are essentially workflows that you can now AI them. And then third, from the user, like the consumer, like say companies using the platforms, both of you, how do they see it? Like, is there maybe an expectation now that like, okay, what's the AI thing that you can do that I can plug in that's easier for me to roll? And I think a lot of companies are having to reinvent themselves. I think Zapier just redid the whole homepage of like we're like an agentic tool now. So there's a lot of that, that's changing. So how do you see like maybe within these 3 aspects, internal employee usage, the tool itself, and then expectation from the customers?
We're using agents like coworkers or like employees at this point. And so I think that's the mentality is it's not a tool, it's a coworker. And so like what does a coworker have? A coworker has access to the same tools that people have, permissions to do things like and an employee can't go write directly to a production database any more than an AI agent can. And so like we think about scoping these things in similar ways, but like the agents fundamentally need to have access to things. And then one of the things we think about too is giving agents like the company brain, like the context of the business. And we're still hooking some of those systems up, but think about like we use a tool called Gong to record all of our sales calls. So we have like, I don't even know how many hours of conversations with customers and prospects and things. And that's like so much rich context where you have our, Snowflake database that has all the data about people use the product or Salesforce, or, you can go through all of this. And so that's way more context than any person could like reasonably sift through or do ad hoc queries or whatever. But like the agents can kind of go through that all whenever they need to. And so we've been really making sure that the agents are set up to not be limited, because that's where a lot of, especially bigger companies, are getting blocked. They're like, well, you can use Gemini and Google Drive, but that doesn't actually get you much. And so we want the agents to be there side by side with the team. So they can mention them in Slack and ask them to go do something, for example. And that's a big unlock. That means that the form factor is like the same as interacting with somebody. We're telling the team, and the team is, reaching for AI first. So there's a simple task still going for that, and then seeing how they can have the system self-improve. So if they ask it to the question about the documentation, it's not in there, like the agent can go and update the product doc. So that way next time it's just there. We're still hooking up some stuff so that things like support tickets can, be first triaged by agents. And maybe similar to you, it's not like all of our support tickets are just in the help docs. Our support tickets are like, why did this payment that I sent at 11:01 a.m. not get processed before the 11:59 cutoff? Like, and then you kind of have like, stuff where you have to like look at data, and it's a more complex like query. But overall, these things are coalescing around like faster work, and like the ultimate customer impact is like we're faster at getting back to them when they need us. We're faster at shipping things. Like our account managers or sales reps, like everyone is shipping product enhancements. The way we're doing that is by having the engineers still approve everything. So I think some people freak out when they see somebody say like everyone in the company is shipping code. That would freak me out if they could just ship straight to prod. But the engineers not only review the code, but they like are responsible for whatever they approve. Which then you could say, well, the engineers, like, what's their incentive to do that? Because they're responsible for someone else's code. But it actually is like a thing that kind of like builds momentum inside the company. Like the engineers are excited about helping their account manager colleagues get improvements out. Like in the same way they like reviewing other engineers' pull requests. And so all these things I think are just making like the velocity of improvement inside of the company a lot faster.
I'm curious if you've seen this. One thing that as we've grown, has been increasingly complicated for us is like just scaling knowledge. Like these days we have so many folks internally who have to pull in 4 or 5 people. And it's like the same set, knowledge experts. You almost like by default create knowledge silos. Coordination costs has continued to increase. One reflection that we've had internally has been that like the ability for folks to be able to make decisions independently has decreased dramatically year over year. And as you grow, more people ask, et cetera. One thing we're thinking a lot about just AI, actually, you've already said it earlier about like the company brain. That's a really important thing for us. There are things right now, even for AI, I don't think AI actually does best in like, let's call it like medium complicated questions. I think AI actually does best in highly super large context questions where it actually exceeds the context, let's call it the context window of any human, right? Like I can't go through 4,000 Gong transcripts. That's just insane, right? Like thousands. And even if I did, I'd hallucinate. I'd hallucinate nonstop, like I'd be like, oh, I remember this, I think, right? Whereas like for AI, it does that really well. And I think the hallucination rates are better. Meanwhile, if you tell it to count to like 20 or something, like falls apart instantly. If you say like hi 100 times, like, like it like degenerates or something. And I actually think this is what like kind of where like the team and humans really find that mix is at this middle ground between the very discrete, the compute, the purely computational, where there's an absolute answer, is this greater than that, what's the number, what's the sum, whatever, versus the highly abstract where you require some judgment. Bridging these two, I think, is where a lot of our team is. So there's been 2 principles we're pushing a lot on right now, which is for any question you have, no longer to another person first, ask AI first, and then for all the knowledge experts internally, we should all contribute our progressive knowledge in, because as we've grown, a lot of folks here have increasingly felt as if their job has become repeating themselves like over and over and over, saying the same thing to like another person. You write a doc, but the reality is, are people going to read that doc? I don't know. I mean, sometimes I don't even read it, so I'm no better, right? But like as you kind of see that emerge, we all should just be contributing back, so that way all of us can like just go be free to learn new things. Like our goal actually, I mean, as people, right? Like our enjoyment doesn't come from repetition. Our enjoyment comes from novelty and learning. So that's been like the big kind of change that we're trying to enact right now is, answers go into AI, knowledge goes into AI, and all of us are kind of like contributing like net new information into this knowledge base, the kind of core foundation, the brain of the company. I mean, beyond that, there are other things. I don't know if we're quite at the same pace as y'all, but like I agree totally that I don't know if I'd feel quite comfortable with AI just like sending code on, like anyone just shipping code. It's crazy, right? It's cool. I think like sometimes you see it, but internal tools for sure. But like for production code, I mean, we deal with such sensitive stuff. I don't know if it's quite possible just yet.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't want to sound totally like a skeptic, but I think we're a while until AI can just ship production code. I don't trust that really.
I do have a question for you both on that, though. It's like maybe there's a company culture, which essentially like, employees, behavior, like things that will define how the company operates. But then for product, that's being shipped by everyone in the company, isn't it like causing an issue of like maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, because they maybe have like different approaches to the same challenge, and they be shipping something that's not necessarily within the product culture in a way?
It doesn't mean you can just ship whatever you want. So like, an account manager can say, hey, I put up a pull request for something with my AI agent help. What do you think? And we can say, no, that's a bad feature. We're not shipping that. So you don't just get to ship it. I think there's still like that, called like product review process. But then the code itself, and this is where the engineers reviewing the agent's code is what matters. So, and we're basically teaching the agents how to code with our patterns and helping it get better at that. So we're giving it feedback and teaching it patterns and things like that. But this is where a lot of people fall down, where they're like, well, the agent did a dumb thing one time, so I'm not going to try it anymore. And that's a big failure mode. You just need to like keep trying and keep improving it.
I don't know if you see this. I mean, I was actually just talking with folks at the company, which is, I see a lot of people like they talk with AI and they like almost like try to make the AI fail as if it's like, I'm like, yeah, right. Like, you're like asking it things where it can't do it well, right? And like almost like to show. I actually think that there's a great disservice to people calling it AI, because like it creates like this weird competitive nature where it's like, oh, it's you versus me, right? Like you computer versus, and like flesh versus silicon or something like that, right? And I don't think so. Like I think far more similar like Google or something like that, where it's just a tool. It's a really, really good tool. It actually is an incredible tool. But I almost think like the branding does a huge disservice to it, because it doesn't operate like human. If you just like go, if you work with it for a bit, I mean, you can anthropomorphize anything, right? I've seen people, believe, look, I have a dog. I love her a lot. She doesn't think like a human, but I think sometimes people think that, right? It's like, it's not like that. It's not like just, a human. It actually doesn't think that way, even though sometimes like it can have behaviors that are resembling of it. So one thing, I mean, we were really trying to like kind of caution against is treating it as if like it's a competitor. I think if you think of it as a tool that augments you in the same way that like way back the day, right? Like people thought like no one could be better than Deep Blue at chess. And, of course, it turns out it's a depth first search like game. You can compute out the game. Yeah. It's the same thing. And on those sort of ends, I mean, that's something right now for us internally, which culturally I think we have to think a lot about, is where does kind of a AI fit into everything? And the second thing actually that you'd mentioned earlier is around like the brand kind of like consistency. Does everyone kind of do anything? We are thinking a lot right now about like how I suspect with the pace and velocity of how AI is moving, pure kind of consistency may not be possible anymore. So the question is like, how do you allow fragmentation to occur from a product surface area and branding perspective that occurs, where like you can have more localized set bulk and like of product experiences and otherwise, because consistency is hard to enforce at this point. Like if you're going to build really, really fast, you probably will lose some degree of consistency. But at the end of the day, through history, every single time you watch like a technological shift, speed almost always dominates in the end. I mean, we're huge fans of Anthropic. We're huge fans of Claude. I've told folks it's kind of crazy that sometimes they're operating on 1.9 of reliability. And people internally are asking like, are they, what was it? Are they, powering really that important, like a production systems? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think sometimes even more important than us, honestly. Like it's crazy, right? And but if you're like pushing that level of innovation, that level of speed, sometimes I mean that comes at that trade-off. But speed oftentimes does become like a huge differentiator. So, yeah.
Good point. And I want to combine the second part of the question on like expectations from the customers on like both Persona and Modern Treasury being more like AI first or maybe AI centric. Is there anything that you're seeing or any expectations or that you're building and shipping that would solve for that?
No, no. I mean, I'll actually answer from a somewhat different kind of perspective because I suspect you have a similar challenge as well on these ends, which is one of the things we actually think a lot about internally is what should not go into AI as well. Like, we deal with like incredibly sensitive data. I don't think consumer data should go into AI. Like it just full stop unless like there's a very, very explicit desire from a company. Like by default, we should be incredibly sensitive about that data going to. I mean, local AI maybe, but like the larger models in which data can. Data is just sensitive at its core, right? So that's actually one in which like trying to create boundary separations within our infrastructure to keep that siloed is just inherently so important. And on the compliant, on those sort of sides, like that's actually maybe our. I actually think right now with where the tides are moving, everyone's trying to push AI into everything, not out. And I think actually increasingly defining what shouldn't be in it is actually more interesting than actually what should.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We've seen that a lot with financial data. I think the other one in what they don't necessarily want from us is, and I think we developed this perspective about a year and a half ago, and I think it probably ended up being right, is that they don't want like a ChatGPT UI inside of every product.
Yeah.
Like every kind of race to like change their whole dashboard to just be chat. And I think what we've seen is like, the MCP wave and now people building these company brains and like putting data inside their warehouses. I think that makes much more sense because, well, I mean, inside of our own company, like we're using, Claude Cowork, whatever, and people are centralizing their questions there. And so like as an infrastructure company, we say, okay, well, we need to be able to let our customers use their modern treasury data inside of their agent tool of choice. And so we need to expose that out to them. That's honestly basic data interoperability. We had those things, those APIs, those data warehouse integrations before AI was really how work was getting done. But I guess it was the right primitive or building block when people got there. I think beyond that, I mean, we're in the business of moving money, so I think people don't want that to happen over AI, and that's fine. But it's more of like we're a partner for them, and they want the velocity that they're getting out of us to be high, and if anything, improving over time. And so I think that's where they say, how are you using these tools to be a better partner to us to ship more product, whatever it might be. And that's something we can show up and tell them about, even if it's not necessarily an intrinsic part of the product surface.
Actually, that last bit, the first bit you had shared earlier, which was like not everyone just wants like a chat GPT interface. Like we kind of went through a very, very similar kind of phase.
We shipped it, yeah.
Oh no, hey, for us too, right? Like we put had a co-pilot there, like during the kind of like heyday of it all. We're like, oh, get that in there, right? The mad rush towards it all. But I mean, one thing actually, I think one of the folks on our design team had says like, if every single day you're putting the exact same query in, right, and you're getting the exact same result out, you probably don't need to wait for a little bit of AI to generate like that result for you. Probably there's a reason why dashboards exist, and a lot of including our product, like there's an expectation of the data you want to see first out of it every single time you go in. Making like the default experience a chat, even if it fetches the data every single time, it's kind of like it's as if like the equivalent every single day asking a person, being like, hey, can you tell me this number? And you're like, there's a reason why people end up creating reports and dashboard products.
Yeah. Can I ask another AI question or should we move on? Yeah. So that's more, again, been a lot of talks on like KYA and like agentics, and operations that are maybe more towards like, okay, how can this tooling or agentics touch data points? So again, maybe touch identity, touch data, PII, touch money or transact on people's behalf. It could be like a small purchase under guardrails of like, hey, it's just my travel tickets or whatever, Nike shoes. But then there's the flip side of that, right? Where you're like, hey, how much do I want to give access to that maybe I want AI to touch first? How are you thinking about, either like MCPs or, solutions that would be using the infrastructure that both Persona and Modern Treasury offer, but then for agents to operate and the agentics to touch on?
Yeah. Agentic payments is a big topic right now. And I think they're almost contradictory things being true at the same time. I think it'll be very big. I mean, personally, I'm excited to be able to interact with an intelligent agent to go buy things or book trips or whatever it might be, as long as I have an undo button. But I also think it's very early, and the use cases are still very nascent. There's not much commerce there. This goes back actually to the infrastructure piece earlier. I think to support these agentic payment systems, a lot of the primitives are there already, because you look at like the APIs from a lot of the agentic payment companies, and they're the same primitives: creating a card for an agent, creating a wallet for them, sending money, whatever it might be. So it's more of like a marketing skin around it. I think some people around the space might think it's simpler, but even if you're transacting as an agent transacting on behalf of somebody, you still have the same fundamental compliance obligations. You're still dealing with fraud vectors, whatever it might be. And so as a company providing infrastructure for agents, you're still going to have to go do all those same pieces we were just talking about earlier. I think as a company accepting payments from agents, you now have way more potential fraud vectors to think about, because you have the entire internet potentially coming after you and making purchases. And I think there are already examples of that, where some of like the vibe coding websites, for example, have a lot of fraud where people are basically like getting free trials and spinning things up just to build things, or get token credits. And so there are companies that have done work to like counter that fraud. And so I don't think that's a headwind necessarily, but it is something that is happening right now. And so there's going to be a lot that people figure out around agentic payments pretty soon.
We talked about this a little bit right before all of this, but like right now, I think for KY, at least from what we've seen right now, it's so nascent, and I think like everyone's trying to there's almost no doubt right now that there will be something around KYA, but I think it's like very similar to early e-commerce, where we're all looking at this as if, we're just taking exactly what we do right now. Like in, previous e-commerce, we would do exactly what we did offline and then just try to translate it online and say, well, you could, you can shop, but now you can just shop online, right? And like in truth, actually, now we look at e-commerce and like, especially with like, things like the gig economy apps like DoorDash and otherwise, like the methodology and how you like interface actually became completely different from what it even looked like when you were doing it offline. And I think like most likely the major use case for KYA will probably not look a lot like kind of just, I think a lot of the use cases right now is like, oh, what if I bought this flight? Or, like what if I just did this, but now with an agent doing it for me, right? And it's like not really that interesting. But being in this seat right now, it's like interesting for, at least I'm certain for y'all as well, which is we're making the infrastructure right now, because that infrastructure actually is one of the major limiting factors right now. It seems very likely that the size of transactions and the number of parties per transaction will probably be a big part of KYA, in which like most likely the agent, right? Like today, if you were to make like some multi-party transaction that, spans like, let's call it 10 different kind of vendors or businesses, it's an incredibly complicated orchestration task, right? But with agents, you're now able to like orchestrate all this, go about it. But now you come into new problems, like how do you track that, like the money movement, making sure that goes seamlessly? How does it kind of reflect you? And similarly with identity, like you want to make sure also all 10 of those payments are tracked to the same person. So I think right now for a lot of companies, first off, there's like really amazing businesses right now trying to explore and like really do novel ideas around KYA, not just let me do this, but with an agent doing it on my behalf, not just like a concierge type of experience. But I think on top of that, I think it's been really exciting being kind of an infrastructure provider as they think about that transformation of what, like what does a world look like where like agents are paying each other, coordinating with each other, right? Like, is it going to be agent to agent payments as well, in which like multiple agents will coordinate to kind of like transact on something, stuff like that, I think will become very, very interesting.
Yeah. Love that. As we come to an end, because I am mindful of your time is expensive, and there's just so much you can afford here, guys. I want to get into like a final question, just more like kind of related to like, as you're building, you're having to stay ahead of the curve in many ways, because again, AI fraud or AI misuse or anything related to like how payments or the stable coins, anything that's changing, you have to be like, okay, how do I make sure that my infrastructure is ready for that? Same for identity. What's kind of keeping you up at night? What's the thing that is like, okay, this is my top of mind thing now, and how I'm thinking for the next couple of years, couple of months, could be a couple of days too. I don't know how fast things are moving.
We could spend a whole bunch of time on topics we didn't even get to yet. But I mean, in the world of payments, there's a lot changing. in fiat world and normal bank payments, there's the instant payment methods. So those are like FedNow and the real-time payment rails. And we're seeing a huge amount of volume on that. I think it's going to be a huge issue. Well, huge issue for wire transfers. I don't think anyone loves wire transfers, so I'd be happy to see them mostly go away. But that's a part of financial infrastructure changing, as well as stable coins. And both of those are just changing the nature of what it means to build payments infrastructure, changing the nature of things like cross-border payments and where businesses are holding money, or where individuals in other countries are holding their money. Like, are they holding it in US dollars or in their local currency? And so those are all like technology waves that we're helping to power through Modern Treasury and through our payments offering. And so that's where most of like our product brain space is going right now, is around what do we need to build to be the best like instant payments platform for the future. And stable coins are instant payments, real-time payments are instant payments, obviously. And so I don't know that it necessarily is keeping me up at night, but it's the top thing on our minds right now.
I mean, there's the standard ones for us, right? Deep fakes, AI allowing identity theft at scale. I mean, probably the one right now that's like really top of mind for me, and it's probably because I mean, I'm sure y'all think a lot about it too right now. And like as engineers, is the cybersecurity stuff is crazy. Like, I've not had a chance to mess with Mythos. I read some of it. I'm like, are we all cooked? Is it all over? Maybe, I don't know. It seems a little crazy. But I mean, that's a really big one. Like, what does a world look like where AI is able to find vulnerability so quickly? And I think we're in like this weird kind of interstitial period. So for us, it has actually been a lot of AI deployments for looking at all the open source code that we rely on, tightening that up. I think supply chain is a really, really big risk. Making sure that we're partnering with like the right vendors, the right folks, who really take like security seriously right now, because we are entering into a phase in which right now, the ability for AI to find ways to break through systems is evolving faster than its ability to actually defend against it, and especially get deployed at scale. I think the bigger problem isn't even just the detection by AI; it's actually the deployment of it and making sure everyone adopts like the fix. So for us, like trying to get proactive about that, but also just like tightening up how much kind of open source dependency. It's hard to overstate how much of the modern kind of tech company is built on open source right now. And open source has also now become one of like the greater risks. So we're thinking a lot about that right now as a whole side, because of the nature of the data that we interface with. And a lot of that also occurs right now. I mean, one major thing we think a lot about right now is like that protection won't probably just be at the application layer with the code, but actually at the network layer as well, making sure that like, however, like let's say there is a vulnerability, making sure that any data leaving your systems is also kind of audited, and making sure that like any sort of like traffic pattern that's exiting kind of like, your egress nodes aren't risky. That's a big thing for us, because we just, I mean, I think AI is terrifying from perspective from cybersecurity.
Yeah, makes sense. And well, as you mentioned, Matt, there's probably room for way more discussions. So if people want to keep, watching or listening to you, is there like do you use Twitter or LinkedIn? Do like Modern Treasury post a lot? Is there any channel for people to follow Modern Treasury?
Yeah, I'm on X and LinkedIn, and so is the company. My co-founder Dimitri is probably the better tweeter than me, but I'm a decent follow too, so I'm on there.
Awesome. How about you, Rick?
I got on Twitter for like 2 weeks, and then I promised myself I like post every week. Dude, people who post a lot, they're crazy. Like I'm scared.
I struggle with that too.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. Like social media, like that stuff's not a joke. I think it's hard. I have a lot of respect for people now who like really build an influence and following. But yeah, I'm on Twitter, Rick C Song. So you can see no post there. So if you give me a follow, pretty cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. Thanks for the time again, and hopefully we're gonna do more of this. Thanks. And if you like this, as I mentioned, you can continue to post. You can comment and tag people that you would like to see next. Maybe if you want to see Rick back or Matt back, tag them as well. Make sure you leave a comment. Thank you again.